Welcome to this explainer. The device you're watching this on right now, it's packing billions of microscopic switches. But how exactly do we translate a perfect, abstract software circuit into physical, totally imperfect silicon? Well, today, we're demystifying VLSI design rules. These rules are literally the ultimate translators, the absolute foundation that makes modern computing physically possible. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by bridging design and fabrication, then compare the micron and lambda rule systems, break down the core geometric constraints, look at design rule checking, and finally, explore how this all scales up in global industry applications. All right, let's jump straight into part one, bridging design and fabrication. So you can kind of think of VLSI design rules as the strict zoning laws of a microscopic city. By definition, they're the geometric constraints governing how we create mask layouts for integrated circuits. They stand right in the middle, bridging that massive gap between theoretical engineering and the incredibly gritty physical reality of semiconductor fabrication. They are basically the singular agreement ensuring a design can actually be built, that it'll work when it is built, and that it's going to last over time. And honestly, without these zoning laws, we'd be looking at catastrophic failures. We need these rules first and foremost because manufacturing has absolute limits, right? Lithography and etching just have finite resolutions. So these rules stop us from drawing unmanufacturable geometries. Secondly, they improve yield by minimizing shorts, which directly bumps up the number of functional, actually sellable chips per wafer. Third, they enhance reliability by stopping physical wear and tear, like electromigration. And finally, they account for process variations. They give us a safe margin against worst-case manufacturing scenarios, those process corners where things like totally unpredictable dopant fluctuations happen. Moving right along to Section 2, two systems, micron and lambda. There are two distinct languages or systems used to enforce these rules. On one side, we have micron-based rules. These use fixed dimensions measured in micrometers. They're incredibly precise, but they're absolutely not scalable. This is the language dominating modern submicron processes in industry PDKs, which, are essentially the factory's exact manufacturing recipe. But on the other side, we have lambda-based rules. These rely on a scalable parameter called lambda, which is tied directly to the process resolution. Because lambda scales, it allows for portable layouts across entirely different technology nodes. It's a real game changer, making it perfect for conceptual design and academic teaching. Contrasting the two directly here, you'll see micron-based rules rely on fixed, hard-coded decimals like 0.1 micrometers or 0.05 micrometers. These are absolute physical measurements. Conversely, lambda-based rules use this highly proportional modular grid. Everything in the lambda system is defined by ratios and proportions, creating a beautifully scalable setup. To truly wrap our heads around the scalable side, we look to the Mead-Conway methodology. In this system, lambda represents exactly half the minimum feature size of the process. And the real beauty of this? Absolute simplicity. All layout dimensions are expressed just as integer multiples of the single variable. Need to define a width? It might be 2 lambda or 3 lambda. When the fab technology improves and the minimum feature size shrinks, lambda simply shrinks right along with it, and your entire layout scales down perfectly without having to be completely redrawn from scratch. Let's move to Section 3, the core geometric constraints. Now we'll look at how this builds our actual microchip grammar by exploring the rules that dictate literally every shape on the silicon. These specific minimum widths solve literal physics problems to prevent conductor breakage. For instance, the minimum polysilicon width is typically 2 lambda. That defines your gate length, and anything narrower risks incomplete etching during the fab process. Then you've got your metal 1 width, requiring a minimum of 3 lambda to ensure it has enough current carrying capacity to prevent electromigration. That's a nasty phenomenon where the metal literally just wears away over time. And diffusion width also sits at 3 lambda, guaranteeing proper dopant activation and really reliable contact formation. Our second category is spacing. Just like you can't build two houses so close together that their roofs overlap, minimum spacing rules prevent electrical shorts caused by the inevitable lithographic misalignments. Poly-to-poly spacing requires a minimum of 3 lambda to prevent gate bridging during the etch process. Moving over to the interconnects, metal-to-metal gaps also need 3 lambda to avoid shorts from even slight deposition variations. And finally, active regions demand 3 lambda of diffusion spacing to stop the accidental formation of parasitic transistors. Keeping elements a safe distance apart, it's simply non-negotiable. Finally, we have the third category, overlap and extension rules. These provide a critical alignment margin during photolithography. They act as a massive safeguard in high-volume manufacturing to prevent open circuits if the masks don't align perfectly. Think of it like a color printer being slightly out of alignment. A polygate must extend at least 1 lambda beyond the diffusion area. Similarly, diffusion has to extend 1 lambda beyond a contact, and metal layers must extend 1 lambda beyond a via. It guarantees that even with those slight misalignments, the connection remains fully enclosed and perfectly sound.
Okay, Section 4, Design Rule Checking, or DRC for short.
Once we've drawn out our chip using this strict geometric grammar, we gotta run it through the ultimate spell check. This brings us to a totally automated 4-step verification process. First, it defines the geometric verification of your layout strictly against the Foundry's rule deck. The purpose here is absolutely vital. Catch any manufacturing violations before you execute a multi-million-dollar tape-out. That tape-out is the final step of sending the design to the factory, actually named from back in the day when engineers literally had to mail magnetic data tapes to foundries. The most common violations the tool flags are exactly what we just covered: minimum widths, spacing, and enclosure. Out in the industry, this is typically run using heavy-duty tools like Cadence Virtuoso, utilizing Asura or PVS.
And let me tell you, this high-stakes spell check is ruthless. Inside the layout software, the DRC tool heavily flags any geometric violations in bright red. Every single one of these red markers represents a place where the drawn geometry violates the Foundry's rule deck. And yeah, every single one must be manually resolved by the layout engineer before the design can move an inch forward. It is incredibly precise, tedious work. Section 5. Industry Applications and Scale. To wrap up this explainer, let's zoom out a bit to see how the biggest foundries on Earth apply these rules. While Lambda rules are fantastic for learning, the real world runs on incredibly complex, proprietary Micron-based rule decks. Take TSMC. They absolutely dominate with industry-leading PDKs for their advanced N3 nodes, utilizing incredibly strict DRC decks containing literally hundreds of highly specific rules. Samsung Foundry enforces extensive decks for their advanced 3D transistor architectures, like FinFET in Gate-All-Around. Intel's rules, they're tightly coupled directly to their proprietary process tech. And Global Foundries tailors specialized PDKs to focus heavily on things like radio frequency, automotive, and low-power applications. Every single giant relies on massive proprietary DRC decks to make physical manufacturing actually happen. I want to leave you with this final thought. What is Lambda? And why exactly is it used in scalable CMOS design? But maybe more importantly, as we keep pushing physical matter to its absolute atomic limits, how much smaller can Lambda really get before these entire rulebooks have to be completely rewritten from scratch? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.